to those of you in our sanctuary and to those of you watching us online. My name is Susan Owen Kinsey, and I'm the worship associate for today. This is the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint, and we welcome you all. We are an inclusive, progressive, LGBTQ affirming church, and we are happy you are here. Now, we come here for a lot of reasons, and this is the moment I can tell you why I come here. One, I get a lot of exercise running up and down the stairs. But beyond that, I come for a place where I can be myself and express my views and listen to others express theirs. We may have differences, but those differences are expressed in a non-threatening way. We can communicate with each other, and in these times, sometimes, that's a good thing. I also come for the music. Our music, we have a small but very talented group that works hard to have music that goes along with the service. And it takes me to a different place at times. So thank you, musicians. I come for the service, to listen to our ministers or our speaker of the day tell me something that I didn't know, make me think outside of my confines, whatever they are. I come for the coffee and comradeship and the ability to talk to people and be in community with everybody. And I'm sure other people come for other reasons. If you would like more information about the Unitarian Universalism or our congregation, please feel free to contact one of our ministers or our office, and that contact information can be found at our website, uuflint.org. It's also, I believe, on the back of the order of, or on our order of service. We're listed all over the place. Announcements. We have just a few of them this time. Sometimes we have a long list, not now. But the information I'm going to give you can be found on your e-updates, which are sent to you every week around Friday. And if you're not receiving any, if you'll check with the office, they'll put you on the list. And please fill out one of the cards in the back of the seats if you'd like more information about us, or if you're new here and would like somebody to contact you. And those cards can be placed either in the baskets at the back at that little table, or instead of filling one out, you can just scan the QR code like every place else nowadays. There will not be a talk back after this service. Usually we spend a few minutes, those of us that want to, in the sanctuary discussing what has been said and giving our viewpoints and feedback. But instead, this is a very important service this week that will start a discussion for the next few weeks, probably amongst us, on an issue that is going to affect our congregation and our denomination. So instead, we're going to have a meeting in the chapel, which is right down the hall here, at noon. And it'll be about an hour. And the meeting is to learn the proposed changes to Article 2 that defines who we are as UU. That article encompasses how we run this church, how we interact with the denomination. It also is all our principles and all our sources. It is basically the hub of everything that comes here. So if you can, please come to that discussion. We need to have input from everybody and to have everybody's side. And we're also going to be talking about electing representatives at that time. Not electing them then, but talking about electing them, because the way we get our voice heard by the denomination is through the General Assembly. And this year it's going to be in Cleveland, and we're going to we're allowed 2 representatives.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh? Okay, for some reason I thought it was Cleveland. In fact, I was thinking of going there and seeing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All right, our final and most important announcement is our congregation acknowledges that we stand on the traditional lands of the Council of the Three Fires and the Anishinaabe people who are the indigenous inhabitants of Michigan. Our congregation supports indigenous-led organizations and grassroots change movements, and we encourage others to do so as well. We also support indigenous-led campaigns in their quest to have careful, chosen lands returned to them. Okay. Now we will light our chalice, which is a symbol of our faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. And if you'll join with me in reading our covenant. We gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth, celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions to increase goodness and justice.
Good morning. Despite what Jerry may have told you, I have not been on vacation. But I am back to work and glad to be here. Actually, I do want to publicly thank Jerry for filling in and doing his work and my work for the last month while I have been resting and recuperating after surgery. So, Jerry, thank you. So. It was lovely to have a nursemaid, but also have someone to do all of your work for you, so it was very nice. Our opening words this morning are from Robert French Levins. Holy and beautiful is the custom which brings us together, to face our ideals, to remember our loved ones, to give thanks, to make confession, to offer forgiveness, to be enlightened, and to be strengthened. Through this quiet hour breathes the worship of the ages, the cathedral music of history. In faith, three guests attend: love, justice, and reason. Let all our hearts prepare them a place.
If you are willing, please rise and we'll sing together, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." Singing, thank you.
Please feel free to light candles of joy or concern during the musical meditation today, either up front or in the back. And you can also write your joys or concerns in the book in the back for our e-update. But first, our spoken meditation is from the latest book from Megan Daum entitled The Problem with Everything: My Journey Through the New Culture Wars. It has been named a New York Times notable book. Megan Daum is a 2015 Guggenheim Fellow and the recipient of 2016 National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. She writes, "It's easier to define ourselves in opposition to something than in alignment with something. It's easier to browse clothing store racks, used car lots, and online dating sites and note what we don't want. No zippers, no sedans, no sapiosexuals, than to home in on what we do want." In 2017, a Pew Research poll found that nearly half of all people who identify as either Democrats or Republicans do so more because they oppose the values of the other party than embrace the values of their own. Another study from that year, conducted by two political science scholars, asked self-identified Democrats and Republicans how they perceived the demographic makeup of the other party. The results were astonishing. Republicans believed that 36% of Democrats were agnostic or atheist, 38% were lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and 44% were union members. The actual figures are 9%, 6%, and 11%, respectively. In turn, Democrats believe that 44% of Republicans were age 65 or older, 44% were evangelical, and 44% had annual incomes larger than $250,000 a year. The actual figures are 21%, 34%, and 2%, respectively. You might say these numbers are reflective of people's ignorance or lack of curiosity about the political process and the world around them. But what was most striking about this research is that the more respondents said they closely followed the news, the more misinformed they were about the other side. Now, this was not a poll of Twitter users. A poll of Twitter users, I'm convinced, would have shown that 100% of people believe that 100% of those who disagree with them are either evil or mentally ill. Not to burst anyone's social media-enabled bubble, but there probably aren't as many evil people out there as some like to insist there are. There might be a lot of assholes, but the number of literal Nazis that walk along among us, as with the number of men who hate women, likely doesn't live up to the hype. But I am beginning to think the culture is effectively mentally ill, or at least notably unwell. I believe there's never been a civilization as emotionally needy as this one. I am convinced the culture is effectively being held hostage by its own fear-driven exaggerations. So enthralled with our outrage at the extremes, we've forgotten that most of the world exists in the mostly unobjectable middle. So seduced by the half-truths propagated by our own side, we have no interest in the half-truths roaming in distant pastures. So weary from trying to manage cognitive dissonance kicked up by our own gospel, we forget to have empathy for those grappling with the confusions of their own doctrines. We forget that in the end, to be human is to be confused. Let us enter into silent meditation.
Bonnie. And now we'll practice singing our rounds.
We're going to sing this together once,
And then
all
we'll-
together, and then we're going to split into rounds. And Dan's going to take this side, and I'm going to take this side, okay?
Sounds good.
Let's wait for our lyrics to come up here too.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. And I'm realizing I think I took our musical selections out of order. So now I'll happily turn it back over to our wonderful pianist.
The First World War will always be remembered for its cruelty, taking the lives of 9 million combatants and around 7 million civilians. A conflict like World War I had never been seen before in history. Around 65 million people took up arms in the Great War. However, a tiny flicker of humanity still glowed in the darkness. It was Christmas on the Western Front when something strange happened. Late on Christmas Eve, 1914, British troops heard German troops in their trenches opposite them singing carols and patriotic songs. And they saw lanterns and small fir trees along the trench tops. The British, initially perplexed, soon joined in. It was the start of an unofficial ceasefire on the Western Front known as the Christmas Truce. The next day, the Germans called to the British to meet them in no man's land. At first, the Brits suspected the Germans would try to kill them, but they saw that the German soldiers were standing on their parapet, unarmed and in full view. They were shouting that they didn't want to fight that day and that they would send some beer. They were all confused and didn't know how to react, but in the end, they agreed not to fight until the following morning. Normally, the British and Germans communicated across no man's land with streaking bullets, with only occasional gentlemanly allowances to collect the dead unmolested. But now, there were handshakes and words of kindness. The soldiers traded songs, tobacco, and wine, joining in a spontaneous holiday party. They exchanged gifts, food, souvenirs, and took photographs. A British machine gunner said he could not believe his eyes. Here they were, the actual soldiers of the German army, and there was not an atom of hate on either side. But the strangest thing the soldiers did was to play a football match. An anonymous major wrote that an English regiment had a football match with the Saxons, who beat them 3-2. And that wasn't the only football match played in no man's land during the truce. There were many other similar stories across the Western Front when soldiers forgot what they were fighting about and remembered their common humanity.
I believe I'm back on track. So you get to help me with this one. And those are your words. All together now 3 times. Let's practice it once. Repeat after me. All together now. Try that. All together now. And the second one goes. All together now. Try that. All together now. All together now. Try that one. All together now. And then it goes. In no man's land. In no man's land. Let's try all of it. All together now. All together now. All together now. In no man's land. And first of all, that was lovely. But I need my cheat sheet. Jerry, you were right. We should have printed the whole thing. But I'll bring you in when it's your turn. such your forefathers died, lost in millions for a country's pride. They never mentioned the trenches in Belgium when they stopped fighting and they were won. A spirit stronger than the war was working that night. December 1914, cold, clear and bright. Country's borders were right out of sight. They joined together and decided not to fight. All together now. All together now. All together now. In no man's land. Together. All together now. All together now. All together now. In no man's land. Together. Same old story again. All those tears shed in vain. Nothing learned, nothing gained. Only hope remains. Together, all together now. All together now. All together now. In no man's land. Together, all together now. All together now. All together now. In no man's land. Together.
In Europe, that song is very well known. Here in the States, not so much, but a very memorable event, to say the least. Individualism, the belief that every single person has rights and should have freedom of speech. Some say so in the governing of their country. Individualism, the belief that people need not follow the herd if they see a better, different path that is both better for them and therefore better for everyone connected to them. Individualism is not just part of our own liberal faith, but also part of the liberal philosophy of government that released humanity from the crushing power of kings, queens, and medieval feudalism. In America, it is our wallpaper that we often don't notice because it is so ever-present. Sometimes it is literally on our walls. When I was in high school, I had 3 posters on my bedroom wall. One was of the legendary Chicago Bears linebacker, Dick Butkus. Oh yeah, I was 5'7", weighed 150 pounds, and I thought I was Dick Butkus. Poster number 2 was a Bible verse. Yea, though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil, for I am the meanest SOB in the valley. It's mostly a Bible verse. And, oh, I was mean too, just like I was Dick Butkus. But poster number 3 was a quote. If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it's because he hears a different drummer. Let them step to the music which they hear, however measured, however far away. Henry David Thoreau. With that wisdom, both Thoreau and his mentor, Ralph Waldo Emerson, created our faith and did their part to set millions of people free from their bondage to powerful, tradition-bound people and governments and their often dehumanizing religions. My message today is about how the very basic elements of liberalism, one of them being individualism, are being challenged, and how that could change Unitarian Universalism and our nation as well. Understanding the forces that could produce such colossal changes can be as simple as understanding why soldiers in World War I could decide for themselves to stop hating each other. And it can be as difficult as understanding the concepts like reductionism and a thing called groupthink. I think we should wrestle with these important ideas, not because it is fun, but because so many people are fighting, wrestling with each other right now. The battles, one of them within Unitarian Universalism itself, can be cruel and full of debilitating hatred. It is a battle that will continue until the combatants understand that we, are locked in a cage match that does not have to be. When I became a student at the UU Star King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California, I learned that but I soon learned there were some minefields of misdirected anger there through which I had to walk very carefully. It usually started when there was only one or two men in a group of female seminarians who somehow got onto the topic of patriarchal oppression. It is a very real and destructive thing, of course. And the group of women, fired up by reading their new copy of The Chalice and the Blade, would understandably get indignant. Then expletives such as damn men would start flying around the room. After a while, one of the women would realize that a few of us damn men were in the same room with them, and they would say quickly, "Oh, not you, Jerry. Not you, Steve." It was too late, though. We had already sustained serious injuries. I remember this well because it happened frequently. Too bad I never had the nerve or the presence of mind to simply say, "Hey, I had Thoreau's Ode to the Individual posted on my bedroom wall. I walked to the beat of my own different, non-patriarchal drummer. Please don't cover me up in your blanket condemnation." Of course, I knew I benefited from patriarchy, but I didn't hold a smoking gun. In the year 2020, 153 liberal writers, professors, and activists signed a letter entitled On Justice and Open Debate. They published it in the Harper's Magazine, and it is now known as the Harper's Magazine Letter. The signers included feminist pioneer Gloria Steinem, the influential philosopher that people who are conservative love to hate, Noam Chomsky, Fareed Zakaria, feminist author Margaret Atwood, the leader of the Liberal Party in Canada, Michael Ignatieff, Salman Rushdie, Cornel West, and Megan Daum. About 15% of the 153 signers were people of color. The letter was about the illiberalism, let me say it again, illiberalism spreading across society that the signers said weakens our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. While the letter calls President Trump a real threat to democracy, it also warns that the resistance should not harden into its own brand of dogma or coercion. It praised overdue demands for police reform, along with wider calls for greater equality and inclusion across our society, but notes that there is now a stifling atmosphere that restricts public debate and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. It seems there is a boundary line between fighting for injustice and becoming unjust ourselves. And that boundary line seems to be growing more faint, harder to see during the fray of battle. This is not a new problem, especially not for those of us who have posted on the interior wall of our brain, "I march to the beat of a different drummer." It seems there are numerous drummers, and sometimes the flack you take is from the imperfect birds of your own chosen flock. For example, the friendly fire I took close to the liberal front line at the Star King School for the Ministry. As a male, I was a de facto suspected perpetrator of sexism, chauvinism, and misogyny, and having a Thoreau poster on my wall as a teenager got me exactly zip. The first week I was there, we planned a big meal that we would cook in the school kitchen. One of my classmates, Lilia from Columbia, was frantic though. She wanted to cook a dish that required pressed garlic, and she didn't have a garlic press. Well, I had driven across the entire length of the continent, pulling a 4x8 U-Haul trailer, and I had packed my garlic press. Just common sense, I think.
That's right.
Lilia was so relieved. I was happy to help, and now I felt like I really fit in. I was now known as culinary sensitive person. That had to buy me some points. We ate, had a good time, and then there was that mountain of dishes to wash. It was odd. Every one of those perfect would-be preachers had some place to go. I had already taken my place at the sink, washing dishes, as I watched everyone else evaporate. A few asked if they could help, but it was clear they really wanted to go. "Oh no, I got this. This is nothing. Me need help? Heck no, get out of here." I shouldn't make too much of this, but I will anyway. First, they unthinkingly infer I'm a patriarchal pig, and then, like Cinderella's evil stepsisters and stepbrothers, they left me to do the dirty work. I knew how to do dishes because there was limited patriarchal privilege in my immediate family. I saw Dad cooking and doing dishes all the time, and I was encouraged to do so as well. Mom didn't think I got them very clean, but that's a different topic. Of course, it was true. If I had shown the appropriate amount of carefully applied patriarchal backbone, I would have asked for some help. I didn't, so I was at fault too. I was obviously not the meanest SOB in the valley. I was just a guy with a garlic press in one hand and a greasy casserole dish in the other. But my petty battles to be appreciated as an individual and as part of a flock at the same time are of course nothing compared to the individuals fighting much bigger battles. History is replete with stories of people who have shown that they are much wiser than the supposed wise governments, groups, and parties that try to rule them. 108 years ago, during World War I, on Christmas Eve, thousands of soldiers, acting on their own individual, heartfelt impulses, decided they should be friendly with our enemies. They were on the front line of a war that had no clear reason to be. Scholars still argue about the causes of World War I, and for the men on the front lines, the battle of ideologies and alliances that threatened their very lives were mostly incomprehensible. Their trenches were so close together they could talk to each other. There was no internet messaging system through which they could keep their hate going by trading unfounded blanket condemnations. It is estimated that 100,000 British and German soldiers took part in that impromptu Christmas truce. And not just by not shooting at each other. A British machine gunner, who was an amateur hairdresser in civil life, cut the hair of a German soldier. Spontaneous soccer matches broke out. English, Scots, Irish, Prussians, and Württembergers tried to sing together and somehow ended up singing Auld Lang Syne. A British captain who witnessed it said, "It was absolutely astounding. If I had seen it on a cinematograph film, I should have sworn that it was faked." Hundreds of other stories and 4 memorials commemorate that event, an event that seemed then and to this day almost unbelievable. The soldiers spoke with their astounding actions, and they said no to governments that told them they must hate each other. They acted not as British or German citizens, but as individuals guided by the better angels of their human nature. Emerson's most famous disciple, Friedrich Nietzsche, had already noted 28 years earlier that individuals can be much wiser than their governments. Nietzsche wrote, "Insanity is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, and nations, it is the rule." In the remaining years of World War I, those groups, parties, and governments made sure the soldiers were never again allowed to show their humanity during the war. In December 1915, Allied commanders gave orders to forestall any repeat of the previous Christmas truce. Units were encouraged instead to mount raids and harass the opposing line on Christmas Eve. Communicating with the enemy was discouraged by artillery barrages along the front line that kept soldiers hiding in their trenches. On the German side, troops were warned that every approach to the enemy will be punished as treason. In other words, death. Perhaps the best word to describe the opposite of individualism is groupthink. That compound word describes a very real thing, and it's not pretty. Groupthink was first described and named in 1971 by award-winning psychologist Irving Janis. Janis had conducted extensive research on group decision-making under conditions of stress. He discovered that when people in a group value harmony and consensus more than rational, objective analysis, they make very poor decisions. When people in groups fall prey to groupthink, they fear being shunned or derided for speaking their mind. Groups that actively deride outsiders may be more likely to engage in groupthink and throw a blanket condemnation over outsiders. Janis noted that anything that stops the conversation, like false rage or over-the-top condemnations, endangers good outcomes. How do you guard against this very real danger? You allow for healthy dissent, which promotes more creative thinking. This allowing for healthy dissent is not happening among many progressives. Instead, we are fighting each other. The stifling of free speech by the groupthink at the UU Divinity School kept me from saying, even thinking, hey, don't shoot me for patriarchy, sexism, chauvinism, and misogyny. I'm only the guy with the garlic press. And today, we see our own coordinating institution, the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UUA, falling into groupthink. Their goal, our goal, is to fight racism and to make sure that Unitarian Universalism is inviting to all people, no matter who they may be. Feeling pressure, being under stress to do more, the group at the UUA, charged with examining our statement of who we are, has become a textbook example of the dangers of groupthink. It is happening in our local congregations as well. People are being called racist if they disagree with the UU's changes to Article 2. Influential voices within the UUA believe that the Enlightenment values, such as believing in the vital importance of the individual's conscience or the use of reason, are themselves the cause of racism. Therefore, they believe they must be taken out of our principles and purposes. They have reduced the many causes of racial injustice to just two main things: individualism and rationalism. That kind of thinking is called reductionism, and it's considered a cardinal sin by scholars who seek the true causes of problems. A lot of UUs in the trenches also disagree with this reductionism, but they are in effect being told to stay in their trenches. This silencing of opinion is accomplished in many ways. First, by no longer publishing letters to the editor in the UU World magazine. Also, there is no printing of any dissenting opinions about Article 2 in the UU World magazine. Opinions given during online listening sessions by the UUA have not been released to anyone. Ministers who disagree with the UUA on how we can fight racism are being kicked out of the Ministers Association. And many ministers now are voluntarily quitting that association in solidarity with those who have been fired. In protest, a new Unitarian Association has been formed and trademarked in just this past December. It is called the North American Unitarian Association. It is unclear how many congregations have already joined. All you hear is hearsay, 50, 80. There is no responsible, verifiable figure at the moment. Could it be? Could it be true that individualism and rationality are the main causes of racial injustice? Could it be that so many dissenting congregations, the ministers fired from the UU's Ministers Association, and the many ministers who have quit that association in protest, could it be that all of these UUs are just overreacting? Could that many UUs be racist who want to support racist UU principles and purposes? And again, that is the way they're being treated by the UUA and many UUs in the pews. Congregations, as we speak, are being broken apart by this issue. I personally doubt very much that there are white supremacists, consciously or unconsciously, and many prominent African American UUs don't think so either. That includes longtime UUA theologian, the Reverend Dr. Thandeka. Dr. Thandeka long ago voiced her opposition to the UUA's anti-racism efforts. As some of you may remember, UUA efforts are driven by the belief that every white person is a racist. Thandeka points out that idea itself is a racist idea. According to Thandeka, it goes against everything our faith holds to be true. We, as individuals, do not somehow hold the smoking gun of racism. We should, of course, look for the ways that racism is perpetuated, and as individuals who see the dangers of groupthink, we can help defeat racism with our own powerful group. individualists have been forming groups for centuries. The individualism espoused by Emerson and Thoreau and many generations of Unitarian Universalists is not about being selfish and socially irresponsible. It's not about refusing to wear a mask in the grocery store during an epidemic. No thinking Unitarian Universalist or any other individualist that thinks about it doesn't understand that our individualism in somehow relieves us of our responsibility to the group. It's never been that way. Individualism is about empowering each person to become the best you can be for the benefit of the world. Yes, and here's the rub, the argument. Yes, the belief in individual rights did indeed allow individuals to own slaves. But that same belief in individual rights allowed people to use their reason and speak their conscience so they could defeat slavery. The problem is not the liberal Enlightenment values enshrined in our principles and purposes. It is the stifling of free speech that would allow the saving truth to emerge with a kind of mathematical precision. Rather than love, than money, than fame, said Thoreau, give me truth. And that is another Thoreau poster. And every UU I know, by their very nature, has the spirit of it posted in their minds. I believe that until our association allows dissenting voices to speak their understanding of the truth in the UU World magazine, the result we want, a more diverse, more inclusive faith, will not happen. The terrible, deadly toll of racism suffered by people of color in America happened in large part because the fruits of democracy, including free speech, were denied to them. Our own association's denial of democratic free speech to every UU will not help us end racism, the racism that still plagues our black brothers and sisters. It is a racism that also haunts every white person with a conscience and the self-awareness to see it. Our leadership must let our ideas meet in what is now a no man's land, where one side of the issue is forbidden to tread. It is so tragic that we are not all together now, but a process that is filled with shaming and censorship cannot give birth to a greater Unitarian Universalism. Thank you. And we do encourage you to, if you possibly can, stay for our hour-long educational session in the chapel starting at about noon after a short coffee hour.
When I was up here last, I made a mistake. I forgot 2 announcements, so bear with me. It's out of their order of service. 1, we have 2 new staff members coming. One is our bookkeeper, Jeannie Boyd, and she's already met with the Finance Committee, and if you want to learn more about her, there was an article in the e-update this last week. And starting next week, we are going to have a religious education coordinator. Now, both of these positions are part-time because given the size of our congregation, full-time would be not workable, not feasible. And her name is Cynthia Scheuer. So those, and the other thing is that those of you that are out there online, the meeting in the chapel will be on Zoom. You can interact with us on Zoom. If you go to the comment section on Zoom, somebody in the chapel will give your questions. And the Zoom code is the one we use for the talkback and the coffee hour, and it's on the screen at the end of this service if you need to look at it. Okay. Now for the important stuff. We affirm goodness in this world. We share the joy of life and stand on the side of love. We share our time, talent, and treasure to continue being a liberal presence in this community. We invite you now to as we take a collection by placing your offerings in the basket at the back of the church as you are leaving, or by an online gift at flint.org. And I think we're taking PayPal and almost everything else. You can direct deposit, all the different ways we now have of making offerings available. So thank you for your time, talent, and your treasure.
Our closing words are those of Adrian Rich from our own hymnal. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world.
And let us extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame. And not the warmth of the community. Please see until we are together again.
Y'all are singing so beautifully today. Feel free to sing along. Well, could the rainbow dreams that we dare to dream will come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up with the clouds are far behind me. Where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops, that's where you'll find me. Well, the rainbow, birds fly over the rainbow. Why, no, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?
Off the coffee half hour, and those of you that can join us at noon.